Hi everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I'm afraid I'm going to have to start on a down note. I'm not an expert with Google Hangouts on air and have been having some trouble wrestling with it to see if it works. So things might go a little bit astray. We'll see how we get on. I usually use Adobe Connect, and we can do another webinar in Adobe Connect that would be much more reliable. But in the meantime, I hope you're hearing me. There is a Q&A session. You'll probably be running about 10 to 20 seconds behind me. So any questions you type may take a while. I'm going to just turn on the Q&A session here to one side. So if you have any questions, you can type them in there. I suppose one of the weaknesses of Google Hangouts, or maybe because I haven't got that used to it, is I'm actually fairly unaware if anybody's listening to this in the webcast at the moment. But not to worry, because this will generate an automatic recording, and I should be happy enough with this. Okay, so if you click on the Q&A, I think up there on if you move your mouse towards the left of your window, you should be able to see the Q&A button and be able to type those in. And I'll try and keep an eye on any questions that come in. Okay, none so far. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen. I have PowerPoint opened with a presentation, and we'll go through that presentation now. Okay, so I'll just share my screen. This will take... Okay. There we go. We're ready to go on the presentation now. Okay, just the credits for the people that are running this project. Hang on a second. This says present to everybody. Okay, so everybody should be seeing that in the recording now. This is where it's quite easy to make a mistake. By the way, one of the good things about using Adobe Connect, where you have very good connection with the student or with the audience that's on there, is that if they're not hearing or seeing you, they will tell you quickly enough. Okay, so there are the team members, and let's get into the presentation. Using webinars for MOOCs as a tool for MOOCs. Okay, so this presentation we're going to look at what's a webinar, what are the advantages of using a webinar in a MOOC, what sort of technology is involved. I want to add the idea of guest presenters, because I think a webinar is probably one of the best ways to bring in guest presenters, and the types of systems available, which I won't say will be comprehensive because I'm not aware of a lot of the systems are available, and particularly the costs, but we will tell you about what we're aware of anyway. Okay, so what's a webinar? Well, it's an interactive live online presentation. Now, I've not got any questions in so far, this is not going to be that interactive, but it has the potential to be interactive. I could ask you questions now at this point. What do you think could be made to make this more interactive? Or what do you think about what a webinar is, or something to do with the slide that's on here, and get responses here in my Q&A area that would make it interactive and live on the day. So you can do that, and that's something that you can't really do with the recorded presentations. Generally, it's less than an hour. You really don't want, in fact, an hour could be said to be a bit on the long side. You don't really want these things going on too long, particularly if they're somewhat like a monologue. But I have to say, with tools like Google Hangout that are quite good for merging, say, a meeting, excuse me, and a broadcast, you could get some pretty lively discussions that could be quite engaging for up to an hour. But I think an hour would be about pushing it. It's really one-to-many. I'm talking, there can be lots of people on. Excuse me. But in a way, that's the way a MOOC is anyway. Okay, you can see my slides, you can see the audio, that's the minimum. You can also see headshots as well. And we can do a certain amount of, as I say, get interactivity through a text-back channel. It's not really possible to get your audience on audio, because there would be probably too many of them. That would be quite confusing. And audio, remember, you have problems with the technology, you end up wrestling that the audience is trying to get their technology working and it's holding you back. So really just a text back channel is really all that you can have. Okay, what are the advantages of using a webinars over maybe other forms of content in a MOOC? Well, they are quite easy to create. It's just like putting we'll say a good set of PowerPoint slides together and going online and presenting that good set of PowerPoint slides. And I do say good because you should try and get the quality of your regular PowerPoint presenting up as good as possible. But where you gain is where you don't get too involved, or you don't get too high expectations of quality. If you make mistakes, you tolerate mistakes, you don't edit them afterwards if there's trouble with the lighting, these types of things. If you can get it right first time, do the best you can to get it right, then deliver and record, and that's it. It's done. I would say access to guests as well, because it's very easy to bring in extra presenters from anywhere in the world. Now this could be done, and by the way, this doesn't have to be that they have to make presentations, although I do think that's a useful way to do it, to give them some guidelines on putting a presentation together, and they'll put one together and make the presentation. But what I think is almost more stimulating would be if you had a series of interview questions that you could send to the guest presenters, and then it would be like a conversation. Ask them the questions and they'd respond to the questions. It doesn't have to be interviews though. It can be a bit more social if we could get people in on the question and answers, and not doing so well today, but if your course is really big, you're bound to get a few in. Okay, so, and of course, it can be recorded, and that recording can be a learning object or learning content that can be used by your participants after the event and in subsequent events, particularly if it's an interview. Do an interview with a presenter or a guest presenter. The next time you run the MOOC, you may not want to do that interview with them again. So it can become an extra resource, just a resource. The recording is just sitting there. Cost, well, that depends on the technology used, the scale you're going at. And for instance, the cost using Google Hangouts in there is free, but Google Hangouts in there, I wouldn't say is the best webinar tool available, but certainly it's very compelling in terms of cost, and it has some other advantages like ease of publication onto YouTube. But costs, if you already have some infrastructure in your institution or organization, if you're like we have open classrooms in Adobe Connect for up to 100 people. So the size of MOOCs that we might run, 100 might be plenty for the amount of people who would turn up for the live session. So you may well have that infrastructure as well. If you're hosting things yourselves, there are other ones as well. I'll come back to that in a minute, actually. Technology. This is the room I'm in right now. I could take the camera and point it around and you would see it. We'd have to move to camera. But basically, these are the tools that I have. I have a screen that I can write on. I have a second screen. So I can look at one thing on one screen and maybe be sharing the other screen. I have a headset with a good microphone, which I use, and I put the headset around my neck. It doesn't look the best, but it has the best sound. You'll see I have a visualizer there as well, so that I can turn on an extra camera and just put a piece of paper under it and write on it, which is good for spontaneous work as well. A lot of our mathematics lecturers like that. So those are the sort of things that we have. As I say, the technology should have text chat and audio, of course. Some systems have extra little features like polls. I don't think there's anything else there that we need to talk about. It's essentially a web conferencing system, really. Using guest presenters. This is a sort of a recipe I have a few years ago. And since then, I ran webinars, series of webinars where I bring in guest presenters. And what I did is I developed a sort of a little recipe, a bunch of steps that I had to go through to make sure that everything ran smoothly. So it's this is just sort of an overview, and that you get agreement from your guest presenter that they're going to present, agree the topic, the date and the time, and give them presentation guidelines to And that would also be technology access guidelines as well, so that they can access the technology. So you need to do a little bit of practice with the presenter for two reasons. One is to check out that their system will work. Will it work with Google Hangouts? Will it work with Adobe Connect? So you need to, and to train them on the system. Okay, just see the microphone works, things like that. Okay, so the practice, and I would say within 2 days of it, and make sure that the presenter uses the exact same hardware and software, the same machine, the same location as they're going to use on the day, because it's that system that you're testing out. The closer to the event, the less chance that things will go wrong between the test and the event. But of course, if things do go wrong, the less time you have to fix them. And then on the day, replicate that and deliver the presentation. Type of systems that are available for low cost. Let's say Google Hangouts on air, like I'm using now. Big Blue Button is a free system, but you've got to host it yourself. It does integrate with Moodle. So if you're, we mentioned earlier that if you have the skills or have somebody with the skills to build your own free Moodle site, you can also possibly download the Big Blue Button software and host that with yourself and integrate the two of them. Could you use a commercial system that you pay for? Well, maybe your institution has one, like Adobe Connect, Citrix, GoToWebinar, Blackboard Collaborate, and I'm sure you could name other ones. There may be limits to how many people you can bring in. Some of those really are configured for maybe 25 users. I think GoToWebinar is much bigger than that. So just watch out for that. But chances are when you're in the low-cost development of MOOCs, you're not talking about huge audiences. So if you have one of these in your institution, there's a very good chance that it might work. Another one probably is worth mentioning is we have Panopto, which is a lecture capture system. And Panopto actually broadcasts as well with a 10 or 20 second delay, and would work quite well for this. Now, this is just one last slide. Okay, so if we were to use webinars for having live sessions in a MOOC, and as I say, one of the advantages of webinars is you prepare, you record, sorry, you prepare well, broadcast, and it records and publishes. Wouldn't that be very good for really fast content development? I'm talking about really cheap and cheerful. What I've done right now is going to be published onto YouTube within a few minutes of me finishing. Okay, so you could use it for content development. We could use Hangouts on there. It'll automatically publish to YouTube. There isn't really much editing you can do. It needs to be right first time. And is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It can be good to be able to edit, but sometimes it can be good for your sanity and your work. The pressure on you just to say, okay, it's done, it's done. If it's really terrible, do it again. Okay, but do prepare well, do tolerate mistakes, and you can create content onto YouTube this way, just like I've done now. Okay, so I got no question and answers in during the session, so there should be a discussion forum associated with this recording. Please feel free to use the discussion forum to ask any questions about this. So thanks for listening, and let's talk about it. Bye now.